Greetings, my lovelies. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of the Vatican Tapes. But more than likely, if you're watching this video, you want to know about critiquing the critics. It seems like every other day I'm being asked, is the series canceled? When is the next episode coming out? And I can't blame anybody for hounding me with these questions because it's gotten kind of ridiculous. I actually looked it up, and my last subject, Zenith Will Review, was covered 8 months ago. It's really been that long since I had done a Critiquing the Critics episode. So it's really embarrassing when guys like the Nostalgia Critic or the Cinema Snob, release something on a weekly basis, and their videos will be much more elaborate and longer. And so, yeah, I can't do the same thing on a smaller scale on a monthly basis. Well, there are obviously going to be the normal reasons why it's going to take me a while to get an episode out. I work a lot more hours. My work schedule is erratic. There's a lot of personal life shit that gets in the way. I do not get paid that much, if anything, for these videos. So it's not like I could take time out of my job in order to focus on them. I had moved to this new apartment, but the real showstopper, what really killed off my momentum, was the person I had intended to review. Now, I'm not saying that Critiquing the Critics is canceled. In fact, the hiatus is about to end, I believe / hope. I had planned on reviewing somebody called YourMovieSucks.org. And I had watched their videos and was really excited to get to reviewing them because whether they're a good reviewer or a bad reviewer, I'm not going to spoil which. You could always watch them for yourself to figure out. They provided me with a lot of new and interesting content for me to talk about. My biggest concern with Critiquing the Critics is that it's going to become monotonous and repetitive because so many reviewers are alike, and YourMovieSucks.org just was very different and allowed me to, say different things and provide different insights. The problem was that he was providing me too much content to talk about because the script, when I was done writing it, was about 3 pages long, and most scripts that I write for Critiquing the Critics don't go beyond 1.5 pages. I think the only ones which really rivaled this were the movies, like To Boldly Flee and the Cinema Snob movie. Speaking of which, I also need to review like the Angry Video Game Nerd movie. It seems like everybody has their movies out right now. I need to make one. I need to get on that bandwagon. It'll just be a found footage martial horror movie where I sit in front of this camera and talk. Like, oh, the cabin in the background's open, but it was shut before. Clearly I'm being hunted. Totally missing out on cash cow there. But anyway, I totally forgot where I was. But yeah, so the script was really long and bloated, but even worse than that, I just wasn't happy with it. I felt all the points were fine, but the script lacked a flow. It seemed very choppy, and I did not want to go into production with something I was not content with, especially as I know it's going to take forever to film. I usually am at my most miserable in regards to video reviewing when I am doing something very lengthy, and if I'm not happy with the script, I'm not going to be happy with the final product. So I kept trying to fix it. I kept doing rewrites, and it just wasn't working out. I to this day, I'm still not content with that script. So months later, and I am not exaggerating, I think I started writing it like 4 or 5 months. No, I didn't even more than that, because I think I started writing it almost immediately after I released my last episode. But I got into full swing like maybe 4 or 5 months ago, where I was like hardcore working on it because I knew you guys wanted that next episode to come out. But still, it's like nothing. It just same problems. Just now my sentences look a little different. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that. But I decided to move on, and so I selected Pete Dorr as my next subject. And that was a lot easier. I watched his videos, wrote the script, and I just got done a couple days ago, and I am very content with the script. There's only one part that I feel I need to redo, and that's just the ending recap, like the area where I put in the plugs and stuff like that, and like my final summation. But otherwise, I think it's pretty good. So my plan is to enter production on Wednesday, and I should have it done the following week. Could be any time between Monday and Saturday. Could be earlier, probably not. Could be later, probably not. We'll just have to see. It's not a very long script. It's like a page, which is a little shorter than usual, but there are some ideas within the script that are somewhat elaborate for me, so it's going to take a little bit longer just for that alone. But I'm on vacation next week, so there shouldn't be any reason why I can't get it done. And after I release that episode, then I shall return to yourmoviesucks.org, spend a week seeing if I could finally iron out all the problems and be happy with that script. And if I am, I'll start production on that one. If not, after a week, I'll select somebody else, focus on them, and then once I am finished with them, then once again return back to yourmoviesucks.org. So that's what's going on. I hope this is the big update you wanted. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, but primarily Twitter, because that's where I give little updates about how the filming and writing process is going. And then once it gets released on my website, I'll probably say so through there. So, my Facebook and Twitter followers will be the first to see the episode. So that's all I have to say about that. Let's go ahead and move on to the movie that nobody cares about, the Vatican Tapes. Funny thing is, I actually wasn't sure I wanted to see the Vatican Tapes. This was one of those dead weeks where none of the new releases were really interesting me. You, of course, had Adam Sandler's Pixels, but God, Adam Sandler's burned me too many times, and I refuse to see his movies in theaters. Grown Ups 2 still angers me, and if you think I sounded pissed off when I reviewed Terminator Genisys, I can't even form coherent sentences whenever I talk about Grown Ups 2. Gotta get off that track. Where was I? Oh yeah, what else was coming out? I was considering seeing Mr. Holmes, which, even though it looked a bit too artsy for me, I also figured that would probably be a good movie, but it wasn't playing at a very convenient time, so that just left the Vatican Tapes, and I wasn't even sure what that was about, but it seemed like they only started screening, or critics were only able to see this at the very last minute, so that made me presume that this probably was not going to be a very good movie. But I looked up the trailer and I'm like, oh yeah, I did see a trailer for this, like, months and months ago. This isn't looking too good. But I saw the movie, and it transcends good and bad because it's just another exorcism movie. If you've seen one, you've probably seen them all. I actually hold a lot of respect for two exorcism films that weren't very well received and were definitely very flawed. They aren't great movies by any stretch of the imagination, but The Rite with Anthony Hopkins and Deliver Us from Evil with Eric Bana, because they're among the very few exorcism flicks to actually try to break the formula and do its own thing while also incorporating tropes and conventions of the exorcism genre. And I appreciate that, but most of them are just coasting through the various cliches created by The Exorcist, and that's sort of the problem, is The Exorcist was too damn good, and most of these imitations just feel so inferior in comparison. At least with zombie films, yeah, they might be borrowing a lot from Romero's movies, but with the zombie subgenre, there's just so many different styles and tones and I'm going to say concepts that you haven't always seen before. There are different ways to do a zombie movie. With exorcism films, there's not. It's just, is it going to be a decent one or a crappy one? And this one was neither. It's just so blandly ordinary that I'm already forgetting most of what I had witnessed. The good news is that it doesn't do anything too terribly. It's not like The Devil Inside, where some of the badness within that film really jumps out at you, like that awful ending. But at the same time, it's not like I don't even know what a good example of one anymore is. Well, let's say Deliver Us from Evil, which did have some really good stuff in that too, even if the movie as a whole wasn't particularly good. It's just there. And I'm not even sure what I could really talk about. So apparently the screenplay for this movie was on that infamous list of unmade scripts that were really good, but weren't considered marketable enough to make into film. But then once that script was released, then all the studios kind of jumped in on it, and they wanted to produce those films. And strangely, considering these scripts were supposed to be really good, the movies themselves haven't been that great. And I don't see how this one could have made that list, because it's just, once again, taking every cliche and convention from every Exorcist movie ever made and just compiling it. Now, there are a few good ideas here or there that, if they had fleshed out, this film could have been a lot more compelling. I suspect for this reason that the studio tampered with the original screenplay. Maybe it wasn't a conventional horror flick. Maybe it focused more on the Antichrist stuff and was more cerebral and maybe a little bit more of a psychological thriller than an outright horror flick. But, fearing that that wasn't marketable enough, the studio ordered rewrites to where they pretty much just converted it into a generic exorcism movie. I don't know. That is just my theory. I actually thought the film was at its most interesting when it was dealing with the Antichrist ideas. I liked, some of the lines, how they say, we'll describe Angela to us, so we know who she is when we're extracting this demon. And he says, well, she's perfect in every way. At first, that seems like a cop-out answer that suggests he's more in love with his image than her. I'm talking about, this is what the boyfriend says. But then I was thinking, if this is the Antichrist, that's probably how they would be. They would be just as perfect as the actual Christ, except they would be hiding a very dark and evil side to them. I like that, and I think where this film goes in the ending, it feels like it could have been interesting, but for some reason isn't. Some characters' fates are so abruptly resolved that it just kind of left me feeling unsatisfied and irritated, but not quite as bad as The Devil Inside, but it's just, once again, it's a what could have been situation. Like, this film does have some interesting ideas that deserve to be fleshed out, but the character writing is just so sloppy and directionless. Directionless. I don't know why I added the T to that. But, like, for example, they'll introduce aspects of these characters and then never go anywhere with them. So, for example, Michael Pena is the priest, and he's kind of the protagonist. There isn't really a main one here, but I think he's supposed to be the main character. And they introduced that he was actually a soldier in the Iraqi war. And the father of the girl, who is also, I believe, a corporal or a colonel, I don't remember his exact rank, but he says, well, what made you switch uniforms? And he says, I saw enough. And so I was thinking, well, okay, when he confronts the demon, she's going to really use that against him. With that line, he's implying maybe he saw some war crimes committed, or maybe even committed some war crimes, or just the carnage in general of being in a war would be enough to traumatize him. So that should be something the demon would exploit to make him doubt his faith and doubt himself and so on. They never go anywhere with it. The demon barely acknowledges him, and he just kind of stands there during the finale. He's just an observer the entire time, and yet he's supposed to be our main character. I guess he's the audience surrogate, because even though he's played by Michael Pena, who can be very entertaining. He was great in Ant-Man. His personality is unexistent. He's just there. I can't really say anything about his characterization other than the brief description of his backstory. The boyfriend, I think, is even more of an audience surrogate because he doesn't even have that backstory. He's just a boyfriend and he's concerned for his girlfriend. But there's just one scene where he's talking to her after she has been possessed, but this scene is sort of ambiguous whether it's actually her or the demon that's possessing her. And she's like, I need you to be there for me. Something bad is going to happen. And he says yes. And I'm thinking, well, he's going to be present during the exorcism, and he's going to be really concerned about how these priests are conducting themselves because he doesn't really believe in this. So he's going to try to sabotage it in some way. And that's going to create tension. Doesn't really happen. In fact, he pretty much figures out that, oh yeah, she is possessed almost immediately during the exorcism sequence. So why was that scene there? There's also this, he and her father don't like each other for some stupid reason. I guess it's just because the father is a Catholic and doesn't approve of them living together. And you figure, okay, well, that's leading up to somewhere where they'll either reconcile or there's going to be some major conflict where they totally turn on each other. That's something the demon could once again really exploit. But it never goes anywhere, just like everything else. And this one priest comes in and he's like the major exorcist. And I kept thinking as he was doing this exorcism that he seems to be enjoying himself way too much. Like, he seems fascinated by this entity. He seems to enjoy making it suffer. And luckily there actually is kind of a payoff there where it sort of seems like he might be a little unstable because he starts suggesting that they kill this girl. But the way they went about it just made him seem stupid. I kept thinking, he quotes Revelation so much, but how come he doesn't seem to remember the bit in that book where the Antichrist comes to be after taking a mortal wound? What is he trying to fucking do? It's like he wants the Antichrist to get revived, except they never give you the impression that he's some sort of devil worshiper. So just bad writing. There's an interesting, they barely glance over this where it's strongly, it's almost outright stated, but he was possessed as a kid. And the demon was exorcised, but it appears that the demon he's trying to exorcise right now was that same demon. And I'm thinking, okay, that is a cool idea. It's just one line of dialogue they do with that. Very unsatisfying, very underwhelming, very underdeveloped. And that's pretty much this entire movie. The acting's fine by everybody. It's just that nobody has a whole lot to do. I thought the girl stood out the most as an actress, but like the character, you don't get to know her very well before she starts acting all creepy and possessed. They do introduce the idea that maybe it's always been a facade, that maybe she's always been this malevolent creature and she was pretending the entire time, but like everything else, it's just so underdeveloped and just, the possibility is brought up through a single sentence and you end the movie not really knowing. So I cannot say I really liked the script, or at least what the studio did to the script. I never found this movie to be scary. It's strange because the director loves using bright lighting in a lot of his horror-oriented scenes, which at least is an interesting experiment. It's different, I'll give him that. And you see that in the trailers where she's in the ceiling and she's on the beams and you can see sunlight going through, and it's supposed to give her this ironic angelic light about her. God, I just realized her name is Angela. Bit on the nose, by the way, guys. But it just, to me, undermined the terror. And the scenes weren't scary already. I thought the director did a bad job at building suspense, creating atmosphere. Even the jump scares felt oddly limp, but the bright lighting just diminished that even more. There are some good shots here and there. I will admit that I liked the stuff they did with the crow's shadow. That was pretty cool. But as a whole, I just didn't like. I agree with how the director filmed everything. This movie is too polished, and I think horror works best when it's grittier. Um, and even like the security footage when they use it, it's like way too digital. It does not look like security footage that I've ever seen. Maybe it's advanced a lot in the past few years. I don't know, but to me, if you're going to do that, the idea is you're presenting a certain kind of realism. I didn't think there was anything realistic about how that was filmed. But like I said, this film it wasn't unwatchable. It was just there. My first thought after I had witnessed it was, at least it wasn't pixels. I wasn't angry. I wasn't disappointed. I wasn't impressed. I was just like, okay, I kind of wasted that hour and a half, but it is what it is. So I would not recommend you watch this, and if you do like exorcism movies, then maybe when it comes out on Netflix or Hulu or on television, do not spend money on it. Do not go to the theaters and support it. It's just not very good. I did do a written review, so please read that. I've also done written reviews of Rabid, directed by David Cronenberg, Return of the Jedi, the third Star Wars movie, and Premature Burial, an old Roger Corman horror flick. So read all of those. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.